right, welcome. Well, thanks for joining me this morning. And I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully that's what you see. And you see a slide there with our title and my contact information if everything's going well. So great. So the first thing I really want to do is really get to know who's here. And I know there's a bunch of you, but just a quick, usually I can see your name already, but if you can put in the chat box, in the chat, put your role and your goal for this session. So why you're here, essentially. Okay, and then I'll turn this off so I actually can see some of your chats as they roll in. All right, so just your role, second grade teacher, whatever role you play, and what your goal is for this session. Great. Okay. Great. Got folks from all over the place. Good. We'll keep those rolling if you haven't gotten it in. My hope is to, looks like your goals are aligned for the most part with what we're going to be talking about this session. And just a quick background on me, one of my favorite topics is my background is as a special educator. I was trained as a special educator and worked in a school district in California that that transitioned to a fully integrated service delivery model. So essentially, my role at the prime young age of 22 last year, that I actually had to take students back from the what was called the county placements, or what we call the ESD placements here in Oregon, and not just bring them back to special classes, but to fully integrate them in general education classes. And so that's a lot of my experience is as a special educator, but all of my experience is in general education, if that makes sense at all. So really the idea of how do we support students with high needs in general education classrooms. And so that's my background. A lot of my work is working with schools to do that type of work and around systems change. And one of the means to the end for that is a lot of my work is also around positive behavior supports. So, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about one of my bigger passions around universal design for learning. So I apologize if it's going to be a little overwhelming because I have a lot to say in these 75 minutes. So with that, I'll orient you hopefully really quickly to the link. I know I didn't follow directions well, and hopefully this will get to the program as well. But I created a Google Doc for selected, and so you can go through that on your leisure, and then really a number of materials around universal design for learning. So I'm expecting you all to use this stuff. All right, so I'm giving you resources, and so you're going to go back to this. All right, I'm not going to be able to cover all of these really fully today, but I want to make sure that you're well equipped to do this great work. All right, and student-centered resources. So when I talk about those, you'll find those here on this page. All right, then there's video examples of UDL, and then some notable resources. Unbound Ed, if you haven't been to that website, is a great website that really looks at addressing cultural issues and, of course, the idea of teaching grade level content for all learners. And Project Lay, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but colleagues of mine, Amanda Sanford and Julia Sparza Brown, doing some great work here around that for supporting English language learners. And then finally, some resources around supporting students with extensive support needs in academics. All right. So hopefully you found that document. And now, right, I'm dating myself here, but back in the day when we used to present in real life and actually have handouts, we would put the handouts on the chairs and then people would grab the handouts and leave the room. So this is hopefully not your cue to leave the room. But um, if for any reason something happens, you should have all the resources that is or will be discussed during this session. All right. So good. Nobody's left yet. And now, of course, no pressure. If you wanted to leave, I can see the numbers. So, all right. So I'm going to jump in to our first slide. Not only am I committing murder by PowerPoint today, but also murder by link. So I've multiple weapons here today. But so hopefully you'll see our objectives here. And this is what I told John Potter I was going to do. And then I looked at this last week and said, I must have been doing this while I was also writing a 10-week course and a syllabus for a 10-week course. So we're going to try to really address these pieces of how to organize curriculum and to really reflect universal design for learning and really with the lens for all learners. And when I say all learners, I really do mean all learners. Develop procedures and tools for infusing prioritized skills for students to meet also their IEP objectives and be involved in general education classrooms. I think that's a concern of folks, right? The idea of students being included and what that really means and how do we make sure that's meaningful for them, as well as how are they accessing that content, that core content. And then my hope is for you all to engage with some practical tools. I think all the tools that I'm showing you today are freely available for you. So I hope that will be helpful to you. All right. And I'm having some control issues, but that sounded funny. But so here we go. Let's see if I can move you all that way. All right. So starting off, I think there's great work inspired by my advisor Rob Horner at the University of Oregon, where he talked about the idea of schools, and you all are all doing great work in supporting learners as best as you can, right? And of course, we have a lot of things, especially pandemics and other things that get in our way of doing that. But we're teachers and we persevere, right? But unfortunately, there's things set up where there's still students that are left out, and so students who may have disabilities, we know students of color and from different cultural backgrounds, students that may have invisible disabilities, right? We're not quite sure that young lady who never speaks out, so she must be doing well, right? And then of course we have our outward signs of folks, students struggling with social behaviors. And unfortunately, what we see still in the data is that these students are left out, right? And sometimes pushed out. And so I really want to think about changing that narrative and the idea of, instead of pushing out students, how do we pull them in, right? And so really I want us to expand that circle and the capacity that we have in our schools. And what we're going to talk about today, hopefully, will be a big start to that, is the idea of how do we design our instruction, our curriculum, and our environments so that we can really pull in these learners, right? Because if we're not pulling them in, we are unfortunately pushing them out. And so the idea of creating environments to really support that. I think this next slide is a cartoon that inspired from Michael G. Greco, who's a great educator in Vermont. And I think just kind of, if I would say, a cartoon that accentuates my career, or what I want my career to be, right, is the idea of building more ramps, and the idea of not trying to force students up the stairs, but really, how do I design my curriculum in the beginning so that, right, students can access what all other students are accessing, and of course in a meaningful way. And so that's the hope, right? Is definitely, so the one theme is, if they ask you what did you learn today, it's to build ramps, right? We need to build more ramps in our curriculum or instruction in even our environments definitely need more ramps, right? And I wanted to start off with showing a video that maybe can kind of get to the heart of this better than I can. And so hopefully if all things work out for me, I'm going to stop sharing really quickly and then try to reshare. Maybe. Sorry, I'll get there. All right, so give me a thumbs up or something when you see a screen there, okay? And you see a Shelly Moore YouTube video, I hope, yeah. And give me a thumbs up or a wink or a nod if you can hear, all right? I'll turn on the closed captioning. All right, here we go.
Hi, my name is Shelly Moore, and I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. As Canadians, we have a reputation for finding and embracing the strength in our diversity. This value, however, hasn't been reflected in our classrooms, which still segregates students by ability, especially students with developmental disabilities. There's a gap in our understanding about what we know inclusive education to be, philosophically, versus what we understand and the importance of understanding inclusion in our practice. This is the question I'm trying to answer in my research, is how can we find the value in the day-to-day practice in our classrooms in terms of inclusive education? So how am I going to explain this to you? Now I can sit here and try and describe this, or we could have a little bit more fun. Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, what often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball was the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are kids who need the most support and are kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach to the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to, the kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with universal design for learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
All right. Hopefully you all could hear and see now, right, that we just need to hit the lanes more. But one big piece, one takeaway there, right? My hope is the idea of, right? I don't know if you learned how to bowl, but I learned how to throw down the middle, right? And I think my teacher preparation program probably taught me how to roll down the middle. And so the idea of really expanding my repertoire, and so that really, how do we think about all learners from the beginning, right? My first approach. It's not my second shot, right? Not after I do the lesson am I going to figure out how I'm going to modify for those learners who didn't get it, right? I definitely should reflect, based on my first shot if I didn't do a great job. But my first shot is really focused on all those learners and, of course, the analysis of the pins. And so with that, let me see if I can get back to my slide deck here. And all right. So really introducing universal design for learning. My hope is you've had some exposure to this already, but really with the framework of universal design for learning, that can really help in the beginning, right? Of building more ramps, bowling, whatever analogy works best for you, right? Of the idea of in the beginning, I'm thinking about what I'm going to be teaching in my unit, and then how am I going to represent that in multiple ways so that my learners can actually access it? And you can tell already, I'm a talker, and so I have to also move past, okay, just more than just the auditory presentation, right? So how am I going to do more visual? How am I going to have some make some analogies and different ways for students to really understand what I'm trying to explain, right? Definitely engaging the learners in meaningful content in meaningful ways, and of course giving them opportunities based on their strengths of how to express that they know, right, or that they're able to engage with our lesson. And so that's the lens to really have with universal design for learning. And so with that, I just wanted to get a quick free write in the chat. So take like 30 to 45 seconds and think of 2 ways you or your school or schools have been using UDL. And we've had some great opportunities during distance learning, right? So if that helps, think about what your school or you have done around universal design for learning during distance learning. Make sense? I'll leave that on there for a little while longer, but then I want to get off and see your chats. So all right. Okay, see some audio, speech to text. Good. Right. Some folks found it a challenge. Yeah. Students could write or draw or make some videos. Yes, my daughter loves doing the video piece. I don't know about the writing piece, but we're working on that. Yes, organizing the Zoom links and organizing the structure of the course digitally or online is helpful. Choice boards. Wow, I got a number of folks there, right? I'll do a quick call out there since not everybody may be familiar with choice boards, but Melissa or Michelle, let's see how risky this is. See if you can get off mute and tell us about how you use choice boards during the distance learning time. Go ahead and holler. I can't see you. So Michelle, I think I see you light up. Yeah.
So several of my teachers have used choice boards in their classroom when they're teaching like a skill. They give kids lots of different choices to meet that goal, and so it gives the students that choice to really engage in what they're doing, and they really enjoy it.
So quick example. Put you on the spot. I know.
Let me think for a second. I know I have a K1-2 teacher, and so she was doing a writing piece with her students, and so they got to decide how they were going to present their writing. If they were going to start with a drawing and then the writing, they could do it on their Chromebooks if they wanted. They could handwrite it. They got to really choose how to compose the whole piece.
Awesome. And I see Melissa nodding her head. So go for it, Melissa.
Offering so I just went to a Google Digital Applied Skills workshop, and they have a lot of like if-then stories where you use slides a lot to create your own adventure kind of ways of responding to prompts, that kind of thing. So you can do more visual versus more writing if you're more comfortable with that for now. Just lots of ways to respond
Awesome.
is more
Great.
how I use it.
So if you have a chance, but not to take you too off track, if you have a link to that stuff, that the Google examples that you have, that would be great to share with everybody. But if not, don't worry about it. But it'd be helpful. Thanks. I always love to hear the great, you all are doing great work. So it's great to hear that. So, right. So I saw a number of things there, and it sounds like everybody's been working hard. And I think, and yes, it was something that happened really quickly, right? Literally almost overnight, right? In planning to teach digitally. And so my hope is that this is kind of what we experienced as well, right? Is we want you to teach digitally, but right, or distance learning, comprehensive distance learning. And of course, right, one thing leads to another, and we have to deconstruct everything. And I think the idea and the ideas that we're talking about today are a shift from the way that we typically, right, would design instruction. And so there's a lot of pieces to it. So even if you, right, take it by the reins and really want to do it, there's also other structures that need to be in place to support that. And so really thinking about, right, within your school and your district, how there are supports to make universal design for learning happen, and the idea of collaborating with colleagues, and the idea around time and being efficient to do that, right? And my hope is to at least give you some tools to get there, but we know that, right, we're ORTI, MTSS, right? We need the systems to support these practices, and of course the data to evaluate if these practices are effective. And so kind of a different way of thinking. What I want to introduce you all to right now, and I'm going to send you to a breakout room in a few short moments, is the concept or the ideas around high leverage practices. It's kind of picked up steam probably late 2016, and really through the Council for Exceptional Children, and actually a number of fields now in education are really looking at high leverage practices. And the idea is to really have that opportunity for common language across disciplines, and the idea that we're thinking about what are the practices that actually give you the biggest bang for the buck there. And so with that, I'm going to quickly introduce these high leverage practices, and I'm going to have you all focus on the instruction pieces. Okay. And again, these are linked, and I have 2 textbooks linked for you all. All right. So you can read both of those at your leisure. But there's also a great website, highleveragepractices.org. And they have videos, they have resources to use the high leverage practices. So please take advantage of that great resource. And the 4 big, what they call 4 areas of practice, are lined up around collaboration, assessment, social emotional behavioral, and instruction. And so just to kind of give you a quick, I'm not going to go through each of these, but you are going to, in your breakout groups, go through the instructional ones. But for collaboration, you can see these are the high leverage practices that we should be incorporating in our schools to support all learners. Okay, so definitely the idea of collaborating with professionals and families. Assessment, big, right? And then remember, we just talked about UDL. So multiple, right, ways that students can show that they know the information, right? And of course, using that data then to guide our lessons. Social emotional behavioral, right? Big pieces around, right? Supportive and positive classrooms. Okay. And then the instruction. Okay. And this is the one that I want you all to focus on in your breakouts. And now we have a lot of folks in the room. So we're going to break out and go into the look at the instruction pieces. And what I'll ask is, instruction has the most, so you can see long-term, short-term goals, systematically design instruction, adapt, curriculum, teach, metacognitive skills, scaffold supports, right? explicit instruction, which sounds like you're going to receive a lot of other good information on that. Right? So if you're looking at these in the last two, right, teach students to generalize and maintain and provide constructive feedback. And so what I'm going to do, we'll see how this works out with 80 of you. 6 people ran away real quick when they saw that we were going to do a breakout on high leverage practices. But so what I want to do is, one, this is let me share with you back to the link. Hopefully you have, right, this Google Doc that I scrolled through there. And so you're going to click on this, which will get you to the website. Okay. And then when you get to that website, you're going to explore those high leverage practices. Sorry, I have too many controls in my way here. And go to the instructional section. Okay. And then in your breakout group, and we'll just spend about 3 to 5 minutes or so, you can choose which one you want to talk about in your group and really talk about how you know or don't know about that high leverage practice. Make sense? Okay. So let me go ahead, and I think I can do this. Let's see here. All right. There's a lot of you. All right. So first task, right? Get to that website. It's linked on the Google Doc. Go to the instructional section and then choose one to talk about, one of those 11 to talk about with your friends. All right. And you'll have we'll do about 3 minutes. All right, here we go. Oops, sorry. Moving on, then I'm going to share my screen again. All works out. All right. And so really I want to get to the meat of what we're talking about today is the idea of we all need values and principles to guide us. And so these are what I've come up with, right, based on my work and really working with schools to really transform to use high leverage and evidence-based practices in inclusive settings. And so the big piece there is to start with the student and the family. And of course, I should say students and families, but you get the idea, right? Is we really want to think about each of our learners and what they bring to our classroom. And that's really going to help us identify how to, right, build those ramps in our classrooms and in our instruction and our curriculum. Then the next piece is really promoting self-determination. So I appreciated the share out about choice boards there, because the idea of we don't want learners just to kind of, right, follow. We want them to be to have that advocacy and be leaders and take those risks, right? And we want to promote that in our instruction. And so we want to set those opportunities up and of course make it as safe as possible to take risks. I know it sounds kind of counter, right? But we want to make sure that it's safe to take risks in our classrooms. And then the idea of we want to be able to assess the current and future environments to really identify what supports and needed modifications are there. So the idea of what's happening in my classroom right now, but also what's going to be happening either next door, next period, or of course, what's going to be happening in 5 years from now. And of course, all guided by the students and their families of really supporting them to getting to where they want to be. Then moving into how do we do that? Well, use universal design for learning as a framework to really implement those high leverage practices, which we touched on in a few short moments ago, and really then consistently and collaboratively monitor for improvement. So these are what and I'm going to try to walk us through that today, if I can, and also share some resources along the way. So that's my hope. Okay. And so with student-centered instruction, and of course, on our Google Doc, you scroll down to student-centered resources. All of these are available for you there. Okay. And I think they're all freely available as well. But this is a quote that resonates with me that may be popular to you all as well. But the most successful teachers are ethnographers of the communities they serve. And that was a big deal, is a big deal to me still. Really when I worked in East Palo Alto in California, really being from, you would have never guessed that I'm from Hawaii, but being from Hawaii, that was something that I had to, it was a shift in culture, but really understanding the multiple cultures and languages of the students in the community that I was serving in my classroom. And so as teachers, how do we get that? And so of course, there are a number of ways to do this for at the individual student level or at a more intensive level. We could actually have a meeting with the student and the family and really understand their history and their dreams for the future. And of course, what are some nightmares? What are some things that, right, are scary? And what would an ideal day look like? And so these are questions that, if you have an opportunity to do, right, a little family-centered plan with a family, this would be a great starting point. If you don't have those opportunities, there's a great website called imdetermined.org. Again, this is linked in the Google Docs. And they have a lot of great resources and of course videos and examples of how to use this and templates. So everything is pretty much, I highly encourage you to engage with this website. I work with some schools that use some of these practices for all students. So I know it's you may think of students with disabilities, but actually in their classrooms, they do something like this, which is called a one-pager that you'll see on imdetermined.org. And every student, right, in the beginning of the year, and can update it as well, identifies on one page their strengths, their interests, their preferences, right? And of course, their needs. And so now on one page, I know at least a little bit more about all of my students. There's also some other helpful tools that we've used, around, especially around behavior supports for students who may have some struggles. And so the Good Day Plan is a useful tool to really help really just see from the student's perspective, what is a good day to you, right? Like I'm having fun teaching this science lesson, but what does it look like? What would be a good day for you, right? And I can resonate with this example here, right? Of what happens on a good day. I wake up and have a great cup of coffee, and does it happen now? No. And then what needs to happen to make it a good day? Well, I need to get up earlier, and who can help me? Myself, and maybe my spouse could nudge me or something, right? But the idea of really helping students to kind of see, this is not my good day, this is not your good day. And some of the things right, might not fit with what I think is a good day, but now I know you a lot more and kind of know what works for you, right? And so that's a useful tool that from imdetermined.org. I talked about the idea of promoting self-determination in what we're doing when we're teaching. And so these are things that I want to make sure that I'm embedding in my instruction. And so as, of course, I'm using universal design for learning, and I'm using those high leverage practices, but I also need to teach some of these things, right? Because kids don't automatically set goals for themselves. They, right, may make choices, or sometimes they're not used to making choices, and problem solving. And of course, self-evaluation and giving kids opportunities to monitor their progress, right? And so really building that in, creating opportunities to get help, right? We all interdependence. We all can't do everything. And so how can we advocate to get the help that we need? And how can we be leaders? And how can we have that social capital of, oh, I'm not great at handwriting, so maybe I can dictate it to my buddy or whatever, right? So thinking about, right, what kind of social capital we can help promote for students in our classrooms. And then of course, providing opportunities. So one, making sure that they have, right, these opportunities to be included with other friends, that we make environments that provide these opportunities. And the idea of dignity of risk, right? So we make it safe to take risks in our class. And yeah, I don't think that's going to work out, Brad, but let's see how that goes for you. As long as it's, again, safe, right? And so really seeing how we can support students in that. And so really building that in. Some other quick tools, again, these are linked on the Google Doc, around understanding students better, especially this is designed for students who may not be as verbal and be able to express a lot of those things that I shared earlier. So for younger students, there's the child preference indicators. And for older students, there's personal preference indicators that really talk about their favorites, their feelings, what they view themselves in the family and community. And so these are hopefully useful tools that you can use to really get to the idea of, right, starting with the student, the person and their family, and promoting self-determination. And so then moving on, then really getting into the idea of how do we assess the current and future environments to identify those supports that hopefully we're building in naturally, and maybe some things that I need to add on to what I'm doing in my instruction. And so this is going to create a good opportunity for us in a breakout. So hopefully you see, I think it's in the breakout 2, there's this UDL barrier ID flowchart. Do you all see that? I didn't pull up my Google Doc right now, but if everything's working well for me, I've aligned everything well. The number 2 in the breakouts will be this UDL barrier ID flowchart. You all see that? Give me a thumbs up if you see it. Good. All right. And so what I'm going to have you do is, for probably about 5 minutes or so, look at these. There's they go through the UDL domains, and I think it's a nifty little tool where it shows some disengagement symptoms, which most likely will seem relatable to you in your working with students in your classroom. And then look at some of those ideas for removing representation, expression, and engagement barriers. Because the idea of what are those barriers that I might be having in my classroom that's not helping students. Make sense? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, hopefully you found that document, removing those barriers document, number 2 in the breakout section of the document. Okay, and I am going to then open the rooms, and we'll go from there. All right, welcome back. Those of you that are coming back from the breakout room. Hope you were able to find everything well. And I hope you found that as a nifty little tool there. I think it was created out of Sanger School District, I think in California or so. Doing some good work around universal design for learning. So I think they share a bunch of examples. Welcome back, everyone. Great. So again, I hope you were able to access that, and hopefully you'll find it useful in the future of really helping. My hope is, right, come and see, go and tell, right? So hopefully the work and the stuff that we're talking about today will be things that you share with your school team and your other friends and those other 22 people that left, right? You'll remind them. No, but with that, let me move to our next part of the presentation, and really moving from the idea of, not just thinking of our classrooms, but now thinking about those learners within our classrooms that may, right, experience more challenges. And so I wanted to share with you all, these are under the student-centered resources section, okay? And so they're all there for you. We're not gonna be able to play with them too much today, but I did want to orient you all to some of these. But the infused skills grid, ecological inventories, and participation plans are things that a lot of folks find useful for really helping have this dialogue of, for that student that, right, is very far below grade level, and now they're in my 5th grade class or my 10th grade class, right? How am I gonna support them when I'm trying to teach geometry or physics or whatever it might be? And the big piece is focusing on the goals and the idea of increasing participation within what they're doing. And so using the infused skills grid, and this is just a quick snapshot of Isaac, and Isaac could be a 4th grader, could be a 9th grader, but really thinking of the idea that, right, these are the objectives from his IEP that he has, and you can see, right, they're far below even 4th grade or 9th grade level. And so the idea of, well, then how is he going to be supported? And we're not asking the how question in the fused skills grid. We're just talking about when, right? When can we actually address these skills? So when can somebody actually use a picture schedule to follow a classroom routine? Well, my hope is almost any classroom, right? When can somebody use sign language, or especially Isaac can use sign language to make requests? Hopefully any class, right? And so hopefully you're seeing a theme here, right? Is the idea of really moving away from not just right, my physics content, but we would put all those contents and those activities on that left-hand column, and then those IEP goals for Isaac on the top, and then figuring out when can those be addressed, right? And so that's the way that, whoops, I guess I was missing a slide there. But so the idea is that there'll be a number of X's in here that really show across the day that Isaac can actually be addressing these goals, and then we can infuse those skills in the general ed classroom. And so that's kind of the when question there. And then the next piece is then the how, right? And so in order to get that, this helpful mnemonic, I hope, can help us along, is we need to adapt, right? We need to ask, what am I requiring students to do in my physics class or my fourth grade, right, social studies class? What are those, and of course we know the standards and right, all those things that we have from our curriculum. So what am I asking all students to do? Then I need to determine those prerequisite skills of the task, right? So in order to use that microscope or whatever it is that I'm doing in the class, what are those prerequisite skills that all students need to know? And then analyze students' strengths and needs. And this is now thinking specifically for Isaac here, or students like Isaac that may have a hard time really accessing, right, what I'm trying to teach in the core content. And then I want to propose and implement some adaptations, and the idea of what are then some target skills and adaptations that I need to put into place for Isaac. And of course, I need to test how well those adaptations work. So this mnemonic adapt hopefully will resonate with you, and really thinking about what am I doing in my class, right? And this is very much linked to that activity that you just looked at, right? Before, the barriers. So what are the barriers for Isaac to really access what we're doing in the class, and also to achieve his IEP objectives? And then what are some adaptations that I'm going to put into place? And so I have linked for you all this handy dandy tool, and this is just an example of one completed for a first grader. It's in a second grade blend class, but you can see how they just kind of mapped out their day, and then what activities all students are doing. What are some natural supports? What are some supports that already are in class that can help everybody, right? Computers, calculators, etc. And then for this student, what are some target things that they need to be doing during this math, what they can be doing during this math block? And then what are some adaptations that we need to provide for them during that time? And so again, really looking at those barriers and opportunities then to help that student like Isaac be a part of our, right, general ed class. And so the next piece, moving through the values and principles to guide right, inclusion and using those high leverage practices, are the idea of using universal design for learning as a framework to implement those high leverage practices. And the idea of, right, we want to build more ramps. We also need to teach students how to use those ramps, right? So we can't just say that, right, adaptation was there, but we actually have to teach them how to use it. And that's where the high leverage practices come into play, right? So the idea of we don't only have to design it, but we also have to teach it. And of course, right, model, lead, test it, or whatever language works for you all there. And so using UDL strategies, again, as the frame, great resource. This one, you can pay to access the full meal deal of it. But if you Googled UDL Gold Book, and I think I have it linked as well under the UDL wizard, but it's a nifty tool to really help look, and you can actually go by content area and say reading comprehension and what grade level, and then there's some nifty little ideas that you can use to support students and using that UDL lens around reading comprehension for third graders or fourth graders or whatever it might be. So there's some great tools as well as you already again had one tool that you saw earlier. Now I want to introduce you to another tool, and this is moving then into using that information to really then embedding that into our lessons. Okay, and so this is called the UDL brainstorming tool. I hope it's listed as number 3 in your Google Doc. You all see that there under the breakouts? And is it number 3? Give me a thumbs up if it's number 3. No? Yes? All right. So that's what we're going to do. is we're going to spend about 5 minutes or so looking at this brainstorming tool. So hopefully you have some information now, right, around UDL and some ideas, but now this is something that I hope will stimulate that a little bit more. Of maybe I might incorporate some of these prompts in my lesson planning. Okay, so let me stop sharing my screen, and then I'm gonna send you to a breakout room for a little while to play around with this brainstorming tool. Got it? The number 3 on the breakouts? All right, here we go. Looks like everybody should be forced to be back at this point. So welcome back. Again, I hope another useful tool, or at least a tool that can stimulate some work that you can embed into your work. Yeah, yes, no, what do you think? Found it useful? All right, Jeremy likes it, and that's all that matters. That's what I was aiming for. Good. All right, so we have about 10 minutes or so. I wanted to introduce you all to about 100 more things, but I'm going to stop with one more, and it'll introduce you to one. Hopefully, you're familiar with the TIES Center. Has anybody heard of the TIES Center? And of course, I have it linked in our resources as well. And they have this nifty little tool called the 5-15-45 tool. And so I'm gonna try to get out of the way and let them present that. It's a short 2-minute video if I can get everything working on my end. And then of course, this is under, of course, breakout 3, which we may not do a breakout for. We'll try to do a big breakout with 62 people and see how this goes. But I'm gonna show you this video, and again, just give me a thumbs up if you actually can see the video. Yes, the TIES Center, do you see that overview? Perfect. And just give me a thumbs up if you can hear the sound.
Hi, welcome to the TIES 5-15-45 tool. Educators can use this tool when planning standard-based instructions for all students, especially those with significant cognitive disabilities. Collaboration can begin, whether you have 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or 45 minutes. Grab your lesson and colleague and let's begin. If you need help finding a lesson or reaching out to your colleague, here are some resources to help you get started. With 5 minutes, the tool can help you and your collaborative teaching partner identify the most important content and instructional methods during the lesson. If you can't find 5 minutes to meet face-to-face, you can use the tool remotely through Google Docs. With 15 minutes, the tool can help you and your collaborative teaching partner build more understanding of the lesson. You will identify, remove, and reduce potential barriers to learning that can ensure all students, including a student with significant cognitive disabilities, can access and engage in the lesson. Check out the UDL-inspired Inclusive Strategies resource under the 15 Minutes tab for lots of ideas of how to reduce barriers in your lesson. With 45 minutes, you can extend your collaborative planning to think about the overall classroom structures and adult supports that can be integrated to support students with significant cognitive disabilities. Let's click to get started.
All right, so hopefully you have access to that nifty resource and that website. And like I said earlier, right, we talked about the change cartoon, and we need to create, right, those systems to support these great practices. And so my hope is that you'll most likely be using the 45-minute tool more often than you're using the 5-minute tool. But by all means, we know some realities. And so they've done a great job of making it efficient and practical for everybody. But with that, I just want to make sure I have some opportunities to answer some questions, because I have a bunch of resources for you all already linked. But I just wanted to take this time to answer any questions for you all with these last 5 minutes or so. So, sound fair? go ahead and shoot either in the chat box or out loud. I'm fine with that.
Sheldon, there's already one in
Oh,
the chat box that you can start addressing, and then people can write some others or get their ideas ready. But this one was sent just a bit ago, and it says, the most difficult students for me to adjust my teaching for are the students that are socially on grade level, but cannot retain information. They have difficulty with memory. Any special strategies, ideas for them?
Great. Yeah. So one, I have linked to that whole high leverage practices section. There's a couple of literally textbooks in those links by McCluskey. And there's actually a chapter around cognitive and metacognitive strategies that can really be helpful. The idea of using, of course, graphics can be helpful, but mnemonics and those types of things. And they share some great research-based ideas for that. So my hope is that'll help start you along that line, as well as, you know, I'm sure you're familiar with the National Center for Intensive Interventions, and that'd be a great place to look at as well for some of those interventions around cognitive supports and memory supports, if I'm answering your question well enough. But other questions? And sorry, I was watching you all while I was talking, but any other things?
If you want to also, if you're okay with it, Sheldon, if they just raise their hand and the reactions.
Yeah, just holler. If I'm fine with that. But yeah, raising hand. I can't see everybody, so I have 3 pages to scroll through. So if you holler, I'll probably see you quicker or hear you quicker. So
turn your camera on and your mic on and let us know.
Yeah.
I also dropped the session feedback form in the chat. Please locate that and provide us some feedback for this session.
Great. Other questions, comments?